All right, we are live here, the New Warehouse podcast with Manhattan Associates, and we're at Momentum 2024 in San Antonio. Today, I'm going to be joined by Ryan Gifford. He is the Senior Director of Supply Chain Solutions for Manhattan Associates, and we're going to talk a little bit about supply chain planning, and we're going to talk about a new announcement that they had just this morning, actually. And we're going to dive into how planning is now coming across multiple different parts of the supply chain, the importance of that, and why that matters. So, Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Definitely happy to be here in San Antonio. Very nice.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about kind of planning from the perspective of, because I think a lot of times supply chain planning, right, has been kind of more focused on a inventory management perspective, right? And this is the New Warehouse podcast, right? So we like to talk about the warehouse, but tell us a little bit about how kind of planning is, I guess, maybe in current state prior to today's announcement, right? How is planning interacting with the warehouse and transportation side of things?
Sure. I think historically what we've seen up until today is that inventory has been operating within its own silo. So when you look at creating your forecast and your replenishment, you don't always take into account the impacts that would have on the warehouse or on transportation and labor. And so you order product and you replenish product, but there's not a whole lot of thought given to what the ramifications of what that might look like are to the rest of the business, the other areas of the business, and how they need to respond. Yeah, that's kind of the state currently, is that they're operating, I want to call a little bit of silos. We've been able to mix WMS and TMS data, and you can, of course, understand what days of the week deliveries are happening, space within warehouses, but never direct communication between.
Yeah, absolutely. Areas. And I think, any aspect of a business, I mean, when you have that kind of siloed type of structure, right, can be detrimental to the business, right? Can slow you down, not give you the best efficiency as possible. But now with this morning's announcement from Manhattan around supply chain planning, tell us a little bit about, I guess, how you guys are tearing down those silos and ripping those apart.
Sure, yeah. So today's announcement really centers and circles around unified business planning. The thought here is really to integrate all of these pieces together. Traditionally at Manhattan, or recently with the Active platform, WMS, labor, yard, transportation, and Omni have all had the ability to talk to each other, where supply chain planning was kind of left out on an island, so to speak.
Right.
Today's announcement unified all of that. And so what we've done is integrated everything within the Manhattan Active platform, real-time data, so that now you have your transportation management, your warehouse management, your yard and labor all integrated with your planning. And so now you have the ability to look out into the future with your forecasts and see what those needs and demands are going to be throughout the rest of the business. And as those needs change in real time, you've got the ability to also react. So it's created a real-time integrated solution that has the ability to interact with various parts of the business, let those SMEs respond to the information in real time and make the best business decisions as possible as they're happening.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's such a good thing to be able to break down those silos, as we talked about, and be able to see kind of that full visibility of everything that's happening, and then plan around that, right? Because sometimes you have, where you're planning that inventory, right? But then on the other side, like the warehouse operation also needs to plan too. And maybe sometimes it's more reactive than proactive. It could be, right, on that side of things. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, from Manhattan's perspective. I mean, what was that kind of point, or I think the term used this morning was the nexus, right? Where something needed to change around planning. Like, what was really the trigger on Manhattan's side to, let's try and solve this, let's come up with this solution?
Yeah, I think we were looking more at what we're terming the blue dot generation. People are more centric, and when you think of the blue dot generation, think of yourself as being a blue dot on an interactive map on your phone, right? And you're going throughout your day. Your needs in that moment are very centric, and they're very instant. People want very quick fixes for the items that they're seeking, whether that's groceries, whether they're grabbing lunch, their kids' bicycle popped a tire and they need to fix that because the kid has a need there too.
Yeah.
All those things are happening very quickly. It's all very dynamic. We haven't had the ability to respond quickly to those needs and those demands as consumer patterns have changed. It's really the impetus or the nexus here is to be able to
Yeah.
respond quicker in real time in ways we haven't before without having a delay of supply or replenishment back through warehouses and transportation. Maybe the ability to get extra items out to a facility today that had extra sales that we didn't maybe initially anticipate. So preventing lost sales, meeting the consumer at the shelf is really important. You don't want to not have product in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And delays in the supply chain have historically meant that you're losing out on opportunity. Our goal here is to maximize opportunity. We want to put people in the best situation to succeed, and you have to be real time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that real time is such a key factor in this, right? Because like you said, that blue dot generation where we're looking for things on demand, right? I think Eddie said this morning he was looking for an air mattress, right?
Right, yeah, it's air mattress.
But yeah, I mean, I think, it's really important to be able to react to that. And like you said, don't miss out on those potential sales opportunities, right? I mean, those ultimately end up being lost sales. And I think the market is so competitive in a sense. And, I'm guilty of this. I'm, in the store and they don't have what I need, and I'm pulling up the Amazon app right in the store and ordering it from them, right? So, so having that flexibility and being able to accommodate this blue dot consumer, I think is such a key to have that success into the future. But tell us a little bit about kind of how this is operating, because typically from a planning perspective, you would kind of plan once in the beginning of the day, right? And now this is kind of continuously ongoing, right?
Yeah, I think one of the neat aspects here that we've envisioned or worked through the use cases, it really impacts labor. When you look at your warehouse and the employees there, they may not be able to meet the demand of filling all of the trucks throughout the day, right? So the supply chain planning solution can now see that maybe labor is falling behind. And that means that it can go back in and it can dynamically shift the orders that are being built for the rest of the day so that the stores get the items that are of most use that day while we're also taking a load off of labor. So we're not going to negatively impact, but we're going to dynamically adjust within the same day or intraday so that we can help reduce a little bit of the labor or at least make sure that the stores get what they're supposed to have midday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great part of it is just that's kind of continuously going in that sense, right? Where
it's always on, it's always looking, it's always thinking. It may not always be making changes. You don't need it to make a million changes throughout the day, but when it sees these patterns throughout, maybe trucks are running late, maybe there's an impact on transportation, so it's going to be able to take that into account. Obviously we walk through warehouse, but there's a lot of use cases here where midday something could shift, and having the ability to have something always watching and making sure that, hey, I can react now. I don't have to wait. We don't have to have something, a nightly batch run.
Yeah.
We did away with the nightly batch run. You don't have to worry about downtime in your supply chain planning tool anymore. We can ingest that information in real time as it's happening, and we can react in real time as it's happening. So help out the staff in your warehouses that are picking orders. Maybe they're ahead of schedule. Maybe we can get more product out today that we don't have to wait until tomorrow. Maybe there's a challenge tomorrow. So we can dynamically adjust to that too. So
yeah,
a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great thing because there's so much, and there's been so much conversation around supply chain disruption, right? And and there's major disruptions, right? Like we all know that one happened a couple of years ago, right? But there's also minor disruptions that happen on a daily basis, like you mentioned, the transportation delay, a truck is delayed, maybe there's an accident on the highway nearby, something like that. So being able to constantly adjust to that and accommodate that to make sure that you're going to have your best results and optimize for the day instead of waiting for the next day to have to update these things and make changes. Then you're going to be able to take opportunity of what we talked about, right? Not losing those sales potentially, or those opportunities that are out there in the market. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, one of the big focuses for Manhattan obviously is Manhattan Active, right? So tell us a little bit about how Manhattan Active is maybe allowing this supply chain planning to be more effective, and how is it kind of intertwined with all of these different parts of Manhattan Active, like the WMS, TMS, YMS, and everything.
Sure. So yeah, we hit on that a little bit earlier.
Mm,
All pieces are now sitting on the same microservices-based platform. There's no downtime. It's versionless. So
right.
we'll seamlessly integrate new updates into the solution every 90 days. Users won't really notice an impact. They'll have new feature function, but there's not going to be a downtime to get the new feature function. You don't have to go through an upgrade process ever again.
Mm,
It's all going to happen naturally throughout the solution set. It's also fully extensible. I think that's something we've harped back on at the beginnings of this a decade ago when we first put our warehouse management, omni management, and then of course our transportation management onto the solution set. It's really just adding in all of the feature function that we've been able to derive out of the solution set and making it more modern as we've added planning now. So integrating all pieces of supply chain kind of within our ecosystem to dynamically adjust and shift and understand each other in the best way possible. And that's landed us with unified business planning, which provides dashboards and visibility to see the different areas of the business. That's great for executives, but it might also be great for lower level users to understand what the impact is of making a real-time change. If I do update, an order that's supposed to go out, what impact does that have on transportation? What impact does that have on labor? Is there a positive financial ramification to me making this change, or am I doing something detrimental to the business? You'll have all of that ability within the solution set, and it's all in the main ecosystem of the Manhattan Active platform. So.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love the fact that you can see that impact, like you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
From like an efficiency perspective, throughput perspective, but also from a financial perspective too, right? Because if you're doing something that's detrimental, like then you're kind of like, oh, okay, like
We might not want
I don't want
to
to
make
do
that
this.
decision. Yeah.
Right. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, from that perspective. I mean, how does that help with kind of like the trickle down almost from the top, right? I mean, how is that kind of impacting where, goals are potentially set at a higher level, and then, you have maybe like a director of ops or warehouse manager that's now in there trying to do some things around, and now they see like these problems. Tell us a little bit about how that's been effective for some companies.
Sure. Yeah. Well, out of stocks with supply chain disruptions have been something that everybody's dealing with. That might be a supplier out of stock. It might be a short term. It might be a long term. But that could be a negative impact on your sales, and you'd need to know whether or not you need to have a supplemental item, a buddy item that's going to replace that.
Yeah.
Do you need to shift permanently away from that item? Quantifying what lost sales looks like is important. It's going to impact everybody's bottom line, and that does have broader implications throughout the entire supply chain. If we've got an out of stock of one of our major items, that might free up more space in a warehouse. It might mean that I need less labor in a warehouse. If I'm not moving it around, my transportation is going to look and feel different. My yard management is going to look and feel different. So broad ramifications of out of stocks, but maybe we've got an increase in sales. We need to understand what that looks like. That's going to dynamically impact also. I need to ramp up the amount of product that I'm carrying. What's my carrying costs look like? What's my transportation costs look like? How many people do I need? Did I staff enough people to meet what that demand is going to look like in my facilities, in my warehouses? Do we have enough drivers lined up? All these are intricate pieces of the entire puzzle. And before they were, I don't want to say operating in silos, but that's kind of what they have been doing, is they've been in their own little sections of the world. And now we have the ability to provide all of that within the unified business planning modules.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great thing to be able to see that impact. I mean, I think especially as we look at, I think there was like one example this morning where they're showing like during peak season, right? Like how you're optimizing, I guess traditionally you're optimizing for inventory, making sure you have the right amount of inventory, and then you're kind of reacting in a sense from a labor perspective and things like that. So talk us a little bit through kind of like that scenario of how this tool will now kind of change the way you look at the overall operation, like during a peak season or during like I guess a blue dot event where there's maybe like an influencer or something that has like a drop of an item. I mean, how will the tool help you better plan around that, not only from the inventory perspective, but just kind of like an overall operational perspective?
Sure. Yeah. I think to your point, it's becoming proactive versus reactive.
Mm,
The example this morning was fantastic, and for those that didn't see, it's really about whether or not you've got the right staffing to meet what those demands look like.
yeah.
If an influencer goes on social media and they post something that becomes a hit thing, do we have enough of our normal staff there? Do we need to hire overtime or extra support staff to come in, temp workers? What's our total landed cost look like if we do that?
Mm,
And do we need to dynamically shift when we're bringing items in and how we're bringing them in, because we still want to meet our service levels? We still have to we still have to sell product. So at the end of the day, we
yeah.
need to do that. But how we do it is important. And now having the ability to look forward instead of basing things on historical demand. We can now see what those demands on labor, transportation, and warehouse are going to look like by integrating planning into that. So there's going to be times when your forecast might shift, and you might do things to a demand planner or a buyer that might feel a little unnatural.
Mm,
But it's because we now have the visibility to impact a bottom line. So maybe we need to back off of our forecasts a little bit, because it's going to save us on labor. And in the end, that's going to be best because we're still going to meet our service level. But there might be times where we need to ramp up big time and we need to bring in additional labor because we're going to miss the sale. So you need to take those parameters into account when making those decisions. We'll have the visibility now, looking forward to do that in a more meaningful way
mm.
to enable more informed decisions.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I love that you said that. It may feel like an unnatural thing, right, for the planner to do when they're having this demand, right, to pull back on inventory,
Sure.
right? But looking and seeing those indicators and having that actual, visualization or the actual data there to make that decision and know that it's the right decision versus doing something that seems like out of character or
Sure.
like a different behavior than we're used to. I think is such a great thing to be able to see and have that tool, right? Because I think, we're human, right? So we kind of get stuck in our ways, the way we do things, and do something different sometimes is like we start questioning it, right? But if we're able to see that and have that display and kind of that answer in front of us for us, then I think that goes a long way and certainly helps out there. So really, very interesting tool or solution that you guys have put together here. And I think, certainly something that's going to be impactful across organizations and operations as a whole on a very large scale. So if we look at, obviously the future kind of happened this morning, right? With the supply chain planning announcement. But if we look towards the future even further from a planning perspective, as you guys see this kind of roll out and start to evolve even more, what does the future around supply chain planning look like for Manhattan or just in general for organizations?
Sure. Yeah. Within our ecosystem, obviously, we talked about the bi-directional information flow. We had some other announcements today around Gen AI, what that's going to look like. So maybe we do, and I think historically it's been inside out forecasting. So what are we doing within our organization? What are we seeing sales internally? The ability to now bring in outside in information. So what do the other data sources look like? What are they telling us? Demand sensing patterns that are out in industry. Maybe that is social media. Maybe school lunch menus have been updated, and so we know, that pizza is going to hit every Friday this semester. That's going to have an impact to some food distribution networks. Picking up those data sources from the outside and bringing them in and being able to analyze those is going to be where we're headed as an organization, to provide that visibility to organizations, to pull in sources of information that make the most sense to their business, and then have that be part of their overall solution set. So your internalized forecast based off of what your demand patterns are looking like, what your sales are looking like, but then also having that external visibility to better understand things in industry or things in society that might also impact the way that you do business and sell items.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I think it's about getting all those, like you said, external influences and how do we kind of harness those and understand that. And, we certainly don't want any kids at home going Fridays without pizza at school. We don't want them to be short, right? We want to make that happen. So I think it's really, really interesting what you guys are doing here with the supply chain planning, and certainly makes a ton of sense on how you've looked at this and been able to tackle this problem, which has taken a little while to figure out. I mean,
Sure.
about 10 years, I think it was. And, it makes sense now to be able to see that from an overall operational perspective. And then that end of day, like that total landed cost as well of everything that's happening
Right.
and moving together. And having that overall unified supply chain that you guys are creating. So, Ryan, I want to thank you for joining me for this conversation
Thanks so much,
today. And thank you to those who have tuned in. If you missed the beginning, we will be posting this later in a couple weeks at thenewarehouse.com as well. And if you're in for another conversation today, join us live again in about 45 minutes, an hour. I don't have my watch on me, but we'll be doing another one later today on generative AI with Manhattan as well. So thank you very much, and talk to you later. Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.